The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to This Week with Mary Holland, President of Children's Health Defense, and myself, Polly Tommey. Mary, let's start with this measles situation. The first article, Brenda Belletti in The Defender, Texas reports 8-year-old died of measles pulmonary failure. Children's Health Defense requests medical records. Daisy's 8 years old, and Dr. Pierre Corey did an excellent job, rundown of the medical records, and the link for that is in the article. But just before we talk about that, Suzanne Burdick wrote this article. An 8-year-old in West Texas died from the hospital-acquired pneumonia. And again, you've got Pierre Corey, Dr. Ben Edwards, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, Brian Hooker, our chief medical officer, that have gone right through, intensely gone through these medical records. And we still have more medical records coming in, Mary. We're still not finished with this yet. But it seems from all four doctors that terrible malpractice happened for poor Daisy.
Yeah, I think I'm so proud of the work that our science team and our defender team have done, Polly, because I think what they're doing is really looking at the truth, looking at the facts, and evaluating them without bias. The mainstream media wants to tell the narrative that this child died of measles, but that's simply not the fact. The reality is this child was in the hospital about a month prior to this, and she acquired hospital-acquired pneumonia. She had a very antibiotic-resistant pneumonia. And because they were so tunnel visioned that it must be measles pneumonia, they didn't treat her properly. And she died. And she died of hospital-acquired pneumonia that wasn't treated, which could have been treated. And so they were treating her for viral pneumonia, measles pneumonia, when in fact she had bacterial pneumonia. So, it's tragic. The first article that you mentioned, Polly, looks at the mainstream media coverage that covers this is a measles death, which is inaccurate. They accuse us of unfounded claims, which is inaccurate. And then they don't cover the vaccine death that we saw in Rochester, New York last week. It's so biased, Polly, and it's so biased to essentially sell pharmaceutical products. And as the first article we talked about pointed out, Merck made $2.5 billion last year for its MMR vaccine. So, this is about money, and it's really, it's very, very biased.
Yeah, and I thought Pierre Corey did an excellent job, especially when he was talking about, he was so upset about how many times unvaccinated was written all over Daisy's medical records, which just he was just saying.
And we saw that so much during COVID, Polly. That is what we saw, right? Instead of people being treated as individual human beings for whatever their medical problems were at the moment, they were castigated by the medical staff. These are unvaccinated people, unvaccinated, with a kind of underlying sense of this person deserves what they got, right? This person didn't vaccinate. They didn't follow what they were told to do. And so whatever happens to them, it's okay. And really, it demotivates the medical staff of like, this person isn't worth saving, I think is the kind of the underlying message there.
Yeah, these hospital protocols, whether they're COVID or measles or whatever, we've got to have a look at that, because this is
I agree with you.
Disastrous. Well, Mary, you wrote an excellent article in The Defender here. The media playbook for measles looks a lot like its COVID playbook. This time, kids are the pawns. The media would have you believe that measles is a deadly disease, but any suggestion that MMR vaccines are safer than measles infection isn't supported by facts. It's a really good article, Mary.
Thank you. I do think that it makes some important points, Polly. Vaccines are a $69 billion industry, and this article cites to work that was done several years ago by Physicians for Informed Consent, for whom I have the highest regard. And they point out that over the recent years, there have been more deaths reported from the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine than from measles, by far. by far. So I think, we really need to think through, what is the media doing? Are they telling us the truth and what we need to know? Or are they supporting their advertisers? Are they supporting their clients and the government? Unfortunately, I think that's more and more what we understand that the mainstream media does. It's a propaganda vehicle more than it is a news vehicle.
Yeah, when Georgie Fisher or Holly were killed by the MMR and they just had the MMR and then they died, that should have been headline news. But no, instead we have these two girls headline news. And also the jury, by the way, is still out on whether she even had measles. And we have not.
Polly, it is shocking. It is shocking that a month into this measles outbreak in West Texas that has been so publicized, we don't know the strain of measles. We don't know if it was vaccine strain or wild strain. And we don't know who the first case was. We don't know how this outbreak started. That's shocking, honestly, for all this attention, not to know what strain it is by now, which surely the Department of Health knows in Texas, and how they think it started. It's bizarre. And it reminds me a lot of the Disneyland outbreak, where they never decided for ages how it started. And then only a year later did they come back and tell us a third of the cases were from the vaccine. They were measles vaccine strain disease. So I'm very suspicious of what we haven't been told about the outbreak itself.
Well, we'll keep everyone updated. As we know, we'll let you know. Well, look, Mary, so the fear is running rampant, especially among the mummy groups on Facebook and social media. So this is an article in People, and the headline is, I got my baby vaccinated for measles early because I live in Texas where 2 children have died. That's the headline. And then it says, when Abby's pediatrician offered the measles vaccination to children as young as 6 months, the Houston mum chose to put her son in the safe zone, whatever that means. Then it keeps saying that the 2 children died, panic after the first child died of measles. One pediatrician wouldn't give a mother the MMR. So she's so panicked, but this pediatrician's not going to do it, that she's gone off to find another pediatrician to get her 6-month-old an MMR. This woman in the article says, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but the vaccine works. It's not worth the risk knowing 2 children have died, except they didn't die of measles. This is the problem.
So I even wonder if this wasn't paid for by Merck, Polly, because essentially this article is an advertisement for uptake of more MMR shots. But the tragic thing that this mother, Abby Henson, apparently doesn't know is that there's no evidence that it's safe for a 6-month-old. The vaccine is recommended with very shoddy data for 12 to 15-month-olds. And as we just said, it's a very problematic vaccine that causes death, that causes encephalitis, that causes Guillain-Barré. It's not recommended for 6-month-olds. Last week, Polly, you and I talked about how the former director of the CDC, Dr. Walensky, is recommending this for 6 months and up. There's no basis for that. And it's tragic that this mom thinks they're now in the safe zone. That's not necessarily the case at all. I mean, it looks like the baby is okay, and thank goodness for that. But she says, the vaccine works. Well, yes and no, and it's not recommended for 6-month-olds, full stop.
You see, this is the thing also. That poor baby that's just had the vaccine, MMR, will have another one at 1 year. And
you're right.
So this is going to be a disaster ahead. Anyway, so, I mean, we've got to get the word out to these mummy groups that these vaccines are not safe. Well, in my opinion, they're not safe at all. But for 6 months, particularly, very worrying.
Yeah.
Okay, well, staying on the measles subject, this is KPRC reporting. A woman recently learned that she is not immune to the measles virus despite receiving the vaccine nearly 60 years ago. The reason I put this in, because we know what this is about, do we not? They are coming for you.
They're already saying, you as an adult should go get your booster. You may not be protected. Your immunity may have waned, which is definitely true. So they're just trying to sell more vaccines. It's like, it doesn't work. It's not a safe product, but you should go and get it. It's crazy, Polly.
It is crazy. Okay, well, we're on top of it. Well, now, last thing on measles, Children's Health Defence is having an up-close event. It's called Inside the Measles Deception. It's Thursday, April the 17th, so next Thursday. Dr. Ben Edwards, Brian Hooker, Dr. Pierre Corey going to be on there. I'm going to be on there. I think you're on there as well, Mary. We're all on there. These up-close events happen sort of like, 3 3 or 4 times a
Once
year
a
or
month.
something?
Once a month.
Once a month. Okay.
Once a month.
Once a month. And it's for supporters who donate $10 or more in a year. So if you've donated $10 or more in a year, you get an invite to this. And if you haven't and you want to, then you can sign up and register here in the show notes. Okay, but it'll be fun. It'll be a fun event. It always is educational, fun, chit chat.
It's an hour. They're really fun, Polly. The up closes are really newsworthy and fun. People can put in their questions, and so there's sort of a presentation at the beginning and then Q&A.
And you'll get a letter that says you're invited to be part of a panel. And actually, somebody called me and said, "I don't want to be on a panel." I said, "No. You are invited to."
Yes, you're invited. You're not on the panel, but you're invited to the panel.
Don't worry, don't panic. Michael Nevodarkis here in The Defender. Media freak out over closing of the health agency FOIA offices. HHS says work will continue. HHS is closing some FOIA offices, including the CDC's, as part of the agency's restructuring under Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Stat News claims this will leave Americans in the dark about urgent health matters. Will it, Mary?
No, Polly. So some of these FOIA offices, Freedom of Information, have absolutely stalled us. This is the same group that said they needed 75 years to release the information on the Pfizer clinical trials. They've been dismal. We've been suing HHS bodies, NIH, CDC, FDA separate lawsuits against separate institutions. I think it's a great idea to streamline this so that they all know what one another is doing and they have common policies. We at Children's Health Defense, who have several active Freedom of Information lawsuits against HHS, we are hoping that HHS will be true to its policy of radical transparency and that we won't have to litigate these cases, that we can actually ask for the information and they will provide it to us in a timely way without our having to go to court. So we're going to wait and see. Certainly we know that Robert Kennedy, as secretary, absolutely believes in freedom of information. He wants radical transparency, and we're going to make sure that that happens through freedom of information because we think it's an absolutely essential tool. And there's a lot of information, Polly, especially about COVID, especially about childhood vaccines, that we have never been able to get up until now. So we're on this. We are definitely still working with the new Freedom of Information Act office, and we are not going to stop that work.
Okay, well, this is a tweet that I pulled this from. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. declares that by September, the US will uncover the cause of autism epidemic and eliminate exposures. Interesting. I wonder what that could be.
Well, what was to me especially interesting, Polly, is that in the conversation that was on X videotape between the president and his whole cabinet, the president said, maybe it's something, we're eating. Maybe it's something we're not doing. Maybe it's a shot. He said that out loud, Polly. The president looking to Bobby saying, great that you're going to get to the bottom of this. Maybe it's a shot. That was a trial balloon for the president and the secretary of HHS to say, yeah, forget what the media is telling you that this has been debunked and it's discredited and it's impossible. It might be a shot. So that was amazing, Polly. That was just amazing.
And Bobby was saying that he's got scientists working around the world. Yes. A whole load of scientists. So this is going to be backed up by loads, not just one little group. Not the Children's Health Defense Science Department, like a load of people are working on this. So it'll be fascinating. And as always, Mary, I really want to make this clear. We've never said that it's only vaccines that cause autism.
No, we have absolutely never said that.
We all want to know the answers to that. It's just I know for my son that it was the MMR. Parents have waited for 30 years. NIH is to study causes of autism, according to the Washington Post. The NIH is still finalizing plans for the new multi-million-dollar research program. We will leave no stone unturned in our mission to figure out what exactly is happening, HHS spokesperson said. HHS, remember, oversees the NIH.
This is an excellent article quoting James Lyons Weiler that this is overdue. We're going to now do actual science. It quotes John Gilmore, longtime activist, saying, let's follow the science, not the financial and political needs of powerful players. And my favorite one here is our own Carl Jablonowski in Science, who says, a great place to start looking is where the powerful tell you not to look. Shouldn't we have learned something from cigarettes and cancer? It's so unbelievable, Polly, to us that finally the highest level of the US government, arguably one of the highest levels globally, is saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Instead of saying, oh, it's debunked, it's discredited, we know it's not vaccines, we don't know what it is, but we know it's not vaccines. They're actually saying, you know what, we're going to go wherever the science leads us. We're going to leave no stone unturned. We have never heard this before, Polly. So it's great news.
It is great news. Okay, Brenda Belletti in The Defender. Government misled the public on thimerosal linked to autism for decades. Falsely claims it's been removed from vaccines. According to a special investigation by journalist Cheryl Atkinson, the government has misled this public again for decades about the science linking thimerosal to autism and other neurodevelopment disorders. It also continues to claim thimerosal has been removed for all the childhood vaccines, even though some vaccines, including those given to children, still contain the ingredients.
This is a great article reviewing what Cheryl Atkinson did. And she makes the point that this has been this concerted propaganda campaign for decades, that even shots that contain trace amounts of thimerosal can be labeled thimerosal free, which is an outrage. And she does the research with the Wayback Machine on the internet to show you that through to 2024, these shots still contain thimerosal and they're being given to children. And we'll go over the next story where 99% of the people who got the flu vaccine last year got them containing thimerosal, which is half mercury, ethyl mercury by weight. It's pretty shocking, honestly, Polly. It's pretty shocking.
It is pretty shocking. The headline on this is Michael Neverdakis' article, deeply concerning. This year's flu shots led to 27% higher risk of flu. People who received a flu vaccine formulated for the 2024-2025 flu season had a 27% higher risk of getting the flu than those who didn't get the vaccine, suggesting the vaccine has not been effective in preventing influenza this season, according to a new preprint study. Well, yeah, flu vaccine is incredibly dangerous, people, and especially for children. That 7-year-old girl that died after one flu shot, remember her? So I can't with the flu shot.
People are mandated to take flu shots to prevent the flu. And it turns out that they have a much higher risk of not only getting the flu, but of transmitting it to their patients. And so I actually want to read a quote in this article, again, from Karl Jablonowski, one of our scientists. The hubris with which we mandate vaccinations ought to be humbled by this study. If one of the premier medical institutions endangers its patients based on an employee mandate, all institutional mandates may cause the harm they seek to avoid. That's exactly right. And what's so interesting about this study, Polly, is it's a big study and it actually is much less influence. It's not industry funded. This was a large population. It was 53,000 people at the Cleveland Clinic. It was in real world circumstances. And this is a big deal study. And it's basically showing, as Dr. Clayton Baker, who we work with, that these flu mandates are a farce, Polly. This is another pretty much of a blockbuster study that should have some pretty serious reverberations.
Pregnant women who took Pfizer's RSV vaccine were more likely to give birth prematurely. The findings confirm concerns raised during clinical trials and shared with regulators, but the FDA approved the vaccine anyway.
So this is another pretty shocking article, Polly. This is looking at the information that Pfizer gave for its Abrysvo vaccine. And it found that 2/3 of the cases of premature birth were in women who took this vaccine and they had their premature births within 1 week. And they already knew when Pfizer went out to do a clinical trial on this RSV vaccine for pregnant women to protect the fetuses from RSV, they already knew that GlaxoSmithKline had halted its clinical trial with a very similar vaccine because it caused premature birth. And Pfizer didn't tell the women in the clinical trial about the halt of the GSK clinical trial with virtually the same vaccine. That is an egregious violation of informed consent. And I wonder whether there's not lawsuits coming on that, because clinical trials are subject to contractual obligations. There's not the same kind of protections they get for vaccines that are fully on the market. So I'm really curious what's going to happen in that situation to Pfizer.
By the way, just going back to that flu shot thing, I forgot to say this. I had a call from someone in the military the other day who's being chased around by the commando, or however it works, to get the flu shot as well. We've got to stop giving our military people mandating the flu vaccine, Mary.
Polly, the people who are subject to these flu vaccines are healthcare workers, and the military. These are people that we, the society, need on some level. And what we just learned from this big real world, non-industry funded study is that it's causing flu. And this goes back to really what Suzanne Humphreys writes about in Dissolving Illusions. And it's called original antigenic sin. When you program somebody for the wrong strain of a particular disease like flu, and then they meet a different strain, they're often less able to protect against it than if they'd gotten no vaccine at all, which is what we just saw. Because Cleveland Clinic was giving their staff religious and medical exemptions to the flu vaccine. So they actually did a real study, and the people who got the shots were worse off. And they put their patients at risk. The whole idea of military and healthcare worker flu mandates is to protect the healthcare workers and the military from the flu. And they're actually making the situation worse. So hopefully Bobby Kennedy is on top of this and they're going to stop this craziness.
Please, soon. Okay. Brenda Belletti in The Defender. Idaho governor signs law prohibiting vaccine mandates. The Idaho Medical Freedom Act prohibits most medical mandates, including vaccines. In the state, under the new law, schools cannot exclude for unvaccinated children during an outbreak of a contagious disease they're not vaccinated against. Idaho leading the charge.
Idaho leading the way. Kudos to our friends Leslie Manuki and Misty Karlfeld and others in Idaho who made this happen. I want to quote here from Sayer G from Stanford Health Freedom and other Green Med Info. This is so exciting. This is really upholding the inalienable right to bodily autonomy. He said, Idaho is lighting the way, and this is a return to constitutional governance, medical ethics, and human dignity. It's a landmark declaration of principle that can and must resonate far beyond state borders. This is so wonderful, Polly. This is really ground up, creating the infrastructure for a whole new paradigm that gets rid of medical mandates.
We had Leslie on Wednesday and again on Thursday. So she's just a shining example of how we need to fight.
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, Brenda Belletti, Defender. EPA to review health risks of water fluoridation, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says. He'll tell the CDC to stop recommending it. So this is EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, and Bobby Kennedy made the announcement at a press conference in Utah, because Utah is the first state to ban the practice of adding fluoride to community water supply. So hopefully coming to Texas soon.
Well, Polly, this is so exciting because the EPA had the opportunity as of last week to appeal the decision of the federal district court that found that their guidelines were inadequate based on the National Toxicology Program. Presumably, the EPA is not appealing that, and that very soon they're going to stop fluoridation. They're going to recommend that every state in the country drop fluoridation. Right now, over 200 million Americans drink fluoridated water, and we know scientifically it lowers IQ for young children and for fetuses and then young children. So this is really exciting. I mean, again, we're starting to see real changes that have been decades. They've been postponed or shelved or buried for decades. So it's exciting. This is again, really good news that the EPA is working with HHS to stop water fluoridation.
That's right. Okay, so I want to just, before we introduce your guests, which is really unheard of on this show, but we have got, Mary's going to talk about it in a minute. I just want to say, after we've done that, the reason why our show is quite short this morning is because we wanted, Heather Ray and our science department have worked really hard on doing the thorough insert into the MMR. And so it's running about 20 minutes or maybe 25. And this is going to be isolated on CHD TV. Please send this to every mummy group, to every single mother who thinks it's a good idea to get the MMR for their child, because by the time you've listened to Heather, and she does it really well, you will not want to put that in your child. And that's going to play in a minute. But Mary, tell us where you are.
Yes, so I'm up in Montpelier, Vermont, and I was here speaking in the state capitol this week, and I'm here with my friends from the CHD New England chapter, Vicki Dubin-Master and Lucy Berto Hutchison. And I'd like to introduce them because the grassroots in the Children's Health Defense activity organization and the movement for making America healthy again is so important. And these people made it happen. You can make this happen in your community and have guest speakers, have films, do events like they just did here. And so I wanted to introduce them. Vicki and Lucy, I'm going to get out of the way and you guys can say hello.
If it's okay, I'd love to just share that I am a chiropractor and I've been one for 36 years. And in chiropractic school, we learn that the power that made the body heals the body. I've been an unvaxxer. I've never been an anti-vaxxer, but I didn't vaccinate my children. And my favorite patients are young couples, young women who are thinking about getting pregnant mamas and children. The sooner the better, because what people need to know, and these young mothers who are so confused, and that's the whole idea of the media and the medical system and all of that corporate pharmaceutical industry, is to instill fear. So as a chiropractor, I've always given my patients this confidence that you have an amazing body and it knows how to heal. Things that stop the healing are the toxins, the trauma, and the emotional stress. Mm-hmm. So if you can keep your body pure, stay away from toxins, which include especially vaccines, you are going to be able to raise really healthy, happy children, and your life and their life will be so much better. And do wellness practices like chiropractic, acupuncture, things like that. And have a support system to help your emotional stress, because we all need each other. And that's something that now I'm going to transition into Vermont and just share that I moved up here recently. And I've been a health freedom advocate my entire life. And coming up here was really exciting. It's a small community, a small state, and low population. So we do have an opportunity to make a bigger impact. And the people that are on this path with me, like Kennedy people originally to get them on the ballot, now Maha people, and all the health freedom people that have paved the path for us at the State House and in Vermont in general, have really built a strong network. And so we are here supporting each other. We have a Maha call weekly to support each other. And it's been like our life force to help each other. And then in the State House, bringing Mary in and Children's Health Defense, you guys, I couldn't be more proud to be a chapter leader here in Vermont for New England. It has been such a wonderful opportunity to help share your message and your network and your information and advocacy. You are really a source and wealth of information, and every parent should be tuning in every single day to your information. And this show specifically, it's such an honor. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I really see that there's a need for people to just have confidence and strength in their own body's ability to heal, and have each other to support, and also be active, because we are riding the wave right now of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he is a powerful force that we can stand behind. And that's what we need to do right now, and just get involved in your local legislation and just with each other. And I'm done now. And we had a great event. Sorry, an excellent event. So thank you so much, Mary.
And I'm Lucy, and I would just encourage people to take heart and find a local Maha chapter or start one, because it feels like there's a force behind this. It feels like we're in the flow of a bigger thing. So whatever your background, join in. And I just want to offer a possible solution to some of your listeners who have children or grown children with health issues. I do NAET, Nambudrapad's allergy elimination technique, and I've watched my patients with autism, ADD, ADHD, all sorts of chronic illnesses get better. Their symptoms just slowly disappear. So there is hope. You can look at naet.com and find a good practitioner near you and see, because we want our children to come back, the ones who have been injured. So there's hope. And that's it. Thank you.
How do people join up the Vermont Children's Health Defense chapter?
If you go on chapters on the website, the children'shealthdefense.org website, you'll see chapters, and then you can find the Vermont chapter, and you'll see the events we had, and you can sign up as a member. And then if you can donate, that your money's going to a really good cause. Anything you can do would be super helpful to move this movement forward.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on the Mary Polly show this week.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor, really, to be here. So thanks for all you all are doing too.
Thank you, Mary. Pray big, stand firm, never settle.
Never settle.
And we'll see you next week.
Hello, CHD. I'm Heather Ray, and this is Vaccine of the Week. Every week, we break down a vaccine packaging insert from the CDC immunization schedule. We examine the disease it's intended to prevent and discuss the vaccine itself. We also touch on some of the things that you, as a parent, might want to know. So today, we're going to talk about the MMR vaccine, MMR2. The CDC recommends all children receive 2 doses of the MMR vaccine. The first dose is given between 12 and 15 months old, and the second dose is given between 4 and 6 years old. The MMR vaccine is intended to protect against 3 separate infections: measles, also known as rubeola, mumps, and rubella, commonly known as German measles or the 3-day measles. All 3 of these viral infections are contagious. They're generally mild and are typically experienced in childhood. Although small outbreaks happen, measles is rare in the U.S., with less than 900 cases occurring since 2020. And since 2015, there have only been 3 measles-related deaths in the U.S. The first was in 2015 when a 20-year-old woman who experienced several complications and comorbidities due to immune-suppressing drugs. She died of pneumonia. The second was on February 26, 2025, when a child who was almost completely recovered from the measles went into the hospital emergency room and was diagnosed with pneumonia. In the hospital, she was given inappropriate antibiotics against the standard of care for the type of pneumonia she had, and her condition continued to deteriorate. She was admitted to the ICU and was finally correctly diagnosed. But the hospital waited 10 hours before starting her on the correct antibiotics for her strain of pneumonia. And it was too late, and she passed away the next day. The child died due to hospital error and not the measles. The third person died on March 6, 2025 at home. The individual was only diagnosed with measles after an autopsy was performed, and the death is still under investigation, and the cause of death has not been determined. If a child is infected with the measles virus, they will usually start showing symptoms about 10 days to 2 weeks after being exposed to the virus. Symptoms may resemble cold-like symptoms, such as a runny nose, cough, sore throat, and a mild fever. They may also get conjunctivitis or pink eye. And a rash of small red bumps clustered together often appears on the face, and it spreads to the torso and the extremities. The rash may become itchy, and children may experience acute fever spikes. Kids who contract measles usually feel unwell for less than a week. Healthy children and adults usually fully recover from measles without incident or complications. In extremely rare cases, complications of measles may include vomiting, diarrhea, encephalitis, and complications in pregnancy. Mumps is a viral infection in which the parotid or salivary glands become swollen and tender. Mumps are pretty uncommon in the U.S., with only about 2,100 confirmed cases in the country since 2020, and most of these cases have been in young adults and vaccinated individuals. If a child becomes infected with the mumps virus, they may start showing flu-like symptoms such as a headache, fever, tiredness, decreased appetite, and swollen salivary glands 2 to 3 weeks after exposure. Some children may experience very mild symptoms or none at all. In rare cases, complications of mumps may include encephalitis, meningitis, and temporary hearing loss. Complications in adolescents after puberty and adults may also include temporarily swollen ovaries and testicles, and an increased risk of miscarriage if the illness is contracted within the first 3 months of pregnancy. Rubella, also known as German measles or the 3-day measles, like mumps and regular measles, is a mild viral infection that before 1959, most children in the U.S. naturally contracted. Rubella is extremely rare in the U.S., and there are less than 10 reported cases in the country annually. Akin to its name, rubella lasts for an average of 3 days. It's less infectious and less severe than regular measles, and the illness does not exist in many countries. The symptoms may include a mild fever, headache, stuffy nose, and a fine pink rash that starts on the face and spreads to the rest of the body. Complications are rare, but can cause serious medical conditions in babies if the mother becomes infected during pregnancy. The condition is called congenital rubella syndrome, and complications are most severe in babies whose mother was infected in the first trimester. MMR2 was initially approved in the United States in 1978. It's one of 2 vaccines approved in the U.S. intended to prevent against measles, mumps, and rubella infections. There's also a MMRV vaccine intended to protect against measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, or chickenpox, but we'll discuss that vaccine in a later episode. MMR2 is manufactured by Merck, and it's approved for children 12 months of age and older. MMR2 is a live virus vaccine. This means that the vaccine is created from a weakened or attenuated version of the measles, mumps, and rubella viruses to stimulate an immune response in the body. One of the scary things about a live virus vaccine is that even though it's attenuated or a weakened strain of the virus, if the person has an undiagnosed immune deficiency, they can be at risk of becoming very ill, and in some cases, it can be fatal. Additionally, people who are vaccinated with a live virus vaccine can shed the vaccine RNA for up to 29 days. This means that if a child who receives the MMR2 vaccine sheds the measles vaccine RNA, it can make others sick with the same symptoms seen with wild-type measles. This can be extremely dangerous for individuals who should not receive the vaccine or those who are immunocompromised. One of the most important things that parents and caregivers want to know is if the vaccine is effective. Does it prevent infection and transmission of the disease it was intended to protect against? So let's look at the packaging insert for MMR2 and see what it says. While the vaccine packaging insert states that MMR2 is effective, many peer-reviewed scientific studies suggest that its efficacy wanes over time. For instance, in 2007, the CDC found that about 35% of 7-year-olds and 60% of 15-year-olds who received the MMR vaccine were susceptible to subclinical infection with the measles virus. Subclinical infection is when you're infected with the virus, but you don't feel sick and you don't have any symptoms. Even though you feel fine, you can still spread the virus to others. By about the age of 25, approximately 33% of vaccinated adults are susceptible to clinical infection. And clinical infection is when you get sick and you feel sick. You show symptoms or noticeable signs of the illness that typically you might see medical care for. As a result of waning immunity from the vaccine, nearly 50% of school-aged children and over 60% of adults are susceptible to measles infection and can spread it to others, even if they have symptoms themselves. When it comes to mumps, MMR2 is even less effective than it is at preventing measles. It's also important to know that MMR vaccine failure and breakthrough measles and mumps infections are common in highly vaccinated areas. These inadequacies and deficiencies, coupled with waning efficacy, are why we are seeing measles and mumps outbreaks in highly vaccinated populations, like high schools, universities, and even in Disneyland. In 2016, the CDC and FDA looked at adding a third MMR booster to improve efficacy. But the effectiveness of the vaccine only lasted about a year, and the authors found that there was not compelling data to support a routine third dose of the MMR vaccine. Whenever we give our kids medicine or any kind of medical intervention, the biggest question we ask is whether it's safe. The most important question we can ask about the MMR2 vaccine is it safe for children? If we scroll down to section 5, we can see that the packaging insert warns that the MMR2 can cause febrile seizures, which are seizures induced by a high fever. According to an article in the BMJ, febrile seizures occur in about 1 in every 640 kids who receive the MMR vaccine, and in about 5,700 children under 18 months old in the U.S. each year. The packaging insert also warns that the MMR2 vaccine can cause thrombocytopenia, which is a low blood platelet count and can lead to serious blood clotting issues. It also cautions children who have allergic reactions or sensitivities to eggs, a family history of immunodeficiency, or who are taking immune globulins or transfusions. Because MMR2 is a live virus vaccine, it's contraindicated for people who are pregnant, immunocompromised, who have a fever, or are on certain medications, or have sensitivities or allergies to any component of the vaccine. We know individuals can contract vaccine-associated measles from those who were vaccinated within 28 days prior to exposure, and that breakthrough infections and vaccine-associated measles can mimic the same exact symptoms as the wild-type virus. If individuals who the vaccine is contraindicated for are exposed to a breakthrough case or an outbreak of vaccine-associated measles, it could put those individuals at risk. There is a very long list of adverse reactions that happened in the clinical trials and after MMR2 was placed on the market, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. The peer-reviewed scientific literature also shows that MMR2 can cause anaphylaxis, joint pain, meningitis, encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, and vasculitis, which is inflammation of the blood vessels. There have been 106 deaths caused by MMR or MMRV vaccines reported to VAERS, which is the CDC Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Keep in mind that grounded in the scientific literature, it's shown that VAERS may only be capturing 1 to 10% of all vaccine adverse events. The MMR vaccine is also associated with numerous serious adverse events, chronic illnesses, and death in infants and children. In section 13.1, the packaging insert states that the MMR2 vaccine has not been evaluated for carcinogenic or mutagenic potential or impairment of fertility. So we don't know if the vaccine can cause cancer, if it can cause genetic mutations, or if it impacts fertility in our children. In section 3 of the MMR2 vaccine insert, we can see the dosing information. Every infant and child is recommended to receive 0.5 milliliter dose of MMR2 between 12 and 15 months of age, and again between the time that they're 4 and 6 years old. Notice on the packaging insert that there's no charts showing different doses according to how much an infant or child weighs. That's because even though most medications that you give infants and children are dose dependent on weight, even the over-the-counter ones, vaccines are not. So a 1-year-old infant who weighs 21 pounds is given the same dose of MMR2 as a 6-year-old who weighs 50 pounds. Now let's go and look at section 11 and discuss some of the ingredients in the MMR2 vaccine. We have the measles vaccine virus live, an attenuated or weakened line of the measles virus, derived from the Enders attenuated Adamson strain and propagated in chick embryo cell culture. Mumps virus vaccine live, the Gerald Lynn B-level strain of mumps virus, propagated in chick embryo cell culture. The chick embryo cell culture are cells derived from chicken embryos. They can be connective tissue cells, skin cells, neural tissue cells, or organ cells of embryonic chickens. It also contains the rubella virus vaccine live, the Wistar RA 27.3 strain of live attenuated rubella virus propagated in WI-38 human diploid lung fibroblasts. The rubella live virus vaccine is made from aborted fetal cells. The WI-38 human diploid lung fibroblasts, in which the Wistar RA 27/3 strain of live attenuated rubella virus was propagated in, was also made from aborted fetal cells. This is not the same baby who contracted congenital rubella syndrome in the womb, but a different baby who was electively aborted during the second trimester and her lung tissue cells were used to make the culture to propagate the Wistar-RA 27/3 strain of the live attenuated rubella virus. Things to consider anytime aborted fetal cell lines are used are that some people have religious and moral reservations regarding the use of aborted fetal cells being injected into their body or the bodies of their children. When using aborted fetal cells, we just don't know if the cell lines are passing oncogenic or cancerous material or not. Sorbitol is another ingredient in the vaccine. Sorbitol is a sugar alcohol used in things like diet soda or sugar-free candies. It's used as a stabilizer and also a bulking agent. However, it can cause side effects like severe gastrointestinal issues, wheezing, tightness in the chest, and trouble breathing, fast heartbeat, seizures, muscle pain, rash, and blurred eyesight. Sucrose. Sucrose is a regular sugar that can be derived from the sugar cane or sugar beets. Hydrolyzed gelatin. This is the gelatin derived from pigs, and it's used as a stabilizer to protect the live virus against the effects of temperature. Things to consider regarding gelatin are some religious communities may be concerned about the use of gelatin in vaccines due to the religious dietary laws. And there have been allergic reactions to gelatin. Recombinant human albumin. This is a genetically engineered version of human albumin protein, where a human albumin gene, which is located on chromosome 4 of the human genome, is inserted into a host organism, typically a yeast like Saccharomyces cerevisiae cells, where it grows this modified human albumin protein that is harvested and used as a stabilizer and prevents degradation of the vaccine during storage. Fetal bovine serum. This is a component of blood collected from the fetuses of pregnant cows when they go to the slaughterhouse. It's used to grow cells for the vaccines. Other than the obvious ethical reservations that people may have regarding how the serum is collected, it's shown that the use of FBS in cell culture carries disadvantages related to the presence of contaminants such as endotoxins, mycoplasma, viruses, and prion proteins. The composition of the serum can vary from lot to lot. Neomycin. Neomycin is the active ingredient in Neosporin. It's an antibiotic used to treat or prevent certain bacterial infections. In 2019, due to safety concerns and toxicity, neomycin sulfate was withdrawn from the market, and it's no longer considered safe. Side effects from neomycin can include hearing loss, nephrotoxicity, which is kidney damage or dysfunction, and neuromuscular blockade, which results in muscle paralysis. It can also cause bowel blockage, balance issues, Parkinson's disease, and other side effects. Although the drug has been discontinued in several forms, it's still used in the MMR2 vaccine. The packaging insert lists other buffers and media ingredients, but it doesn't tell us what those are. However, when we go to the National Library of Medicine's website, we can see that sodium chloride and sodium phosphate are also listed as ingredients. Sodium chloride is regular table salt. It helps dilute and maintain stability of other vaccine ingredients, and it may be used to reconstitute the lyophilized vaccine components. Sodium phosphate is a category of salts using sodium and phosphate. It's used as a stabilizer and as an emulsifier in things like processed cheese and instant pudding. It's also used as a fertilizer, a cleaning agent, and a stain remover. Sodium phosphate comes with a harsh warning of permanent kidney damage and death, and it may cause other serious side effects like seizures, fainting, and irregular heartbeat. So if we go to section 6.1 in the packaging insert and we look at the clinical trial information, as well as some of the adverse reactions attributed to MMR2, we can see that in the clinical trial, the MMR2 vaccine was not tested against the saline placebo control. Instead, the manufacturer focused on comparing different formulations of the MMR vaccine to each other, different administration routes, and measuring antibody responses in previously seronegative or antibody negative children. Additionally, Between 1988 and 2009, Merck, the manufacturer of the MMR2 vaccine, completed 23 post-licensure clinical trials with close to 13,000 children enrolled in the study. With every single study, they only followed the subjects in those trials for 28 to 42 days. The current MMR vaccines contain levels of the measles, mumps, and rubella viruses that are significantly higher than the levels that were safety tested in the MMR vaccine that was approved by the FDA in 1978. The current formulation of MMR2 has never been properly tested for safety. Lastly, there are no long-term prospective safety studies that evaluate the neurological and developmental outcomes of infants and children vaccinated with MMR2. Because the CDC and vaccine manufacturers have failed to do the proper studies, we truly don't know what the long-term effects or health outcomes of the MMR2 vaccine are. Okay, now let's look at the adverse events reported in the clinical trials and the post-marketing experience. Section 6 of the packaging insert is super important. This is a list of the adverse events that were reported during the clinical trials and in the post-marketing experience of the MMR2 vaccine. Remember that the post-marketing experience is the result of the experiment manufacturers do on you, because 28 to 42 days is not enough time to truly understand any short or long-term health outcomes related to the MMR2 vaccine. Here are a few of those adverse reactions that happened either in the clinical trials or after the MMR2 vaccine was approved and released to the market. Paniculitis, which is the inflammation of the fat layer under your skin. Atypical measles, which is vaccine-associated measles. Vasculitis, inflammation of the blood vessels. Thrombocytopenia, encephalitis, and febrile seizures, as we discussed earlier. Anaphylaxis and anaphylactoid reactions. Pneumonia, ear infections and deafness. Rash and measles-like rash. Guillain-Barré syndrome, optic neuritis, which is when the optic nerve becomes inflamed and it can cause blindness, seizures and syncope, which is fainting, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is a serious disorder where painful blisters and burns develop all over your skin and mucous membranes. Then that skin completely peels off and you have to be hospitalized. It can be fatal, and there are several more. These are very serious conditions that can be permanent. Many of these are life-altering and potentially fatal. I want to touch on a couple more things that I feel are really important for every parent to know about the MMR2 vaccine. While the measles vaccine is credited for preventing millions of deaths in the U.S. since it was originally introduced in 1963, if you look at this chart from the CDC, measles deaths in the U.S. were on a rapid decline before 1920 and were quite low by the early 1950s. The MMR vaccine was not approved in the U.S. until 1971. Many people attribute this drop in measles deaths just to better sanitation practices, better nutrition, access to clean water, and access to appropriate medical care, like antibiotics, if they had complications with the virus. Measles is a self-limiting infection that is generally mild and rarely causes serious complications like encephalitis or death. Before the measles mass vaccination campaign came about, most children contracted the infection before they were 15 years old, and then they had lifelong immunity to the virus. Complications from measles, mumps, and rubella are very rare, especially if they are contracted after birth and in children who have normal vitamin A levels. In 1998, Dr. Andrew Wakefield published a paper in The Lancet that investigated the timing of when the MMR vaccine was given to children and the relationship to a gastrointestinal disorder often seen in individuals diagnosed with autism. Although the paper was scientifically sound, Wakefield was publicly ostracized, and the paper was retracted. In 2004, the CDC looked at the odds of a child receiving an autism diagnosis after being vaccinated with the MMR. They found that boys who received the MMR vaccine on time were 67% more likely to be diagnosed with autism than boys who received the MMR vaccine after their third birthday. Sadly, instead of being honest about the results so parents could have informed consent and decide for themselves if the benefit of the vaccine was worth the risk, the CDC dismissed the results and tried covering up the findings. When CHD's chief scientific officer, Dr. Brian Hooker, obtained data from CDC scientist and co-author of the study, Dr. William Thompson, he reanalyzed the data and found that the CDC hid the fact that the odds of receiving an autism diagnosis nearly quadrupled for Black boys when they received the MMR vaccine before their 3rd birthday, compared to receiving the vaccine after they turned 3 years old. 10 years after the initial CDC study, Dr. William Thompson blew the whistle on the CDC and admitted to destroying this evidence to cover up the connection between the MMR vaccine and autism. He said, quote, "I regret that my co-authors and I omitted statistically significant information on our 2004 article published in the journal Pediatrics. The omitted data suggested that Black male children who received the MMR vaccine before age 36 months were at an increased risk for autism. Kids who receive the MMR vaccine before their 3rd birthday also have a much higher risk of being diagnosed with isolated autism than kids who were vaccinated after they turned 3. The MMR vaccine is also shown to cause a higher risk of autism, neurological diseases, gastrointestinal diseases, and atopy, which is a genetic predisposition to develop allergic diseases like asthma, eczema, and allergic rhinitis. Many people assume that receiving the MMR2 vaccine is safer than the measles, mumps, and rubella infections it's intended to prevent. But when we look at the MMR2 packaging insert, it raises some serious red flags about the safety and research behind the vaccine. The risk of serious adverse events after receiving the MMR2 vaccine is concerning, and with only a small percentage of adverse events from the MMR2 vaccine being reported to VAERS, vaccine injury surveillance is extremely limited. We don't know if the vaccine causes cancer or genetic mutations or fertility issues down the road. We don't know the long-term effects and the health outcomes of the MMR2 vaccine because the clinical trials only followed subjects for less than 6 weeks, and the current formulation hasn't even been safety tested. In fact, an MMR vaccine literature review of 60 MMR vaccine studies from the Cochrane Library states, "The design and reporting of safety outcomes in MMR vaccine studies, both pre- and post-marketing, are largely inadequate." In 2002, a Danish study showed that the potential risk of permanent disability from the MMR vaccine far exceeds the risk of death or permanent disability from the measles, mumps, and rubella viruses. I know that was a lot of information today. The MMR2 vaccine is a doozy. But I hope we've given you some information that will guide you a bit in your research, and it'll help you make the right decisions for you and your family. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Vaccine of the Week.